WikiLeaks is back in the news after it published Wednesday part of the secret text of a massive new trade pact called the Trans-Pacific Partnership, or TPP. For the past several years, the United States and 12 Pacific Rim nations have been negotiating behind closed doors on the sweeping agreement. On Wednesday, WikiLeaks released a 95-page draft of a TPP chapter focusing on intellectual property rights.
As yesterday's WikiLeaks showed, the TPP has very little to do with free trade. So only 5 of the 29 chapters of the agreement even have to do with trade at all. What's in that intellectual property chapter? What the Cato Institute would call rent-seeking, governments being lobbied by special interests to set up special rules that give them monopolies to charge higher prices. What does that mean for you and me? In that agreement, we now can see the United States is pushing for longer monopoly patents for medicines that would increase the prices here. They're looking for patenting things like surgical procedures, making even higher medical costs. They're looking to patent life forms and seeds. And with respect to copyright, the U.S. positions are actually even undermining U.S. law. So for internet freedom, if you didn't like SOPA, the Stop Online Piracy Act, the domestic law that Congress, in amazing citizen activism, killed last year when it was attempted to be pushed here domestically, huge chunks of SOPA are pushed through the back door of this intellectual property chapter. Now, what the heck is that doing in a free trade agreement? I would imagine the Cato Institute is also wondering, are Adam Smith and David Ricardo, the free trade philosophers, rolling in their graves? Because that is protectionism. This is patent monopolies. This is copyright extensions. This is actually exactly what Bill just talked about, which is powerful special interests, big pharma, Disney and the other big content guys, undermining us as consumers, our access to the internet, our access to affordable medicine, and they're using their power to put that into an agreement that they've got misbranded as free trade. That's what's the real TPP. So maybe actually we agree between the consumer group, Public Citizen, and Cato that what's in TPP, whatever you think about free trade, ain't so good for most of us.
This is a rare occasion where I do agree with Lori Wallach. I agree that, what's going on in the IP chapter is a special interest free-for-all, a grab bag. U.S. companies are pushing to get what they want in these agreements. And the problem really with that is that intellectual property is not a trade issue, and it shouldn't be in the agreement.
So to me, what was the most horrifying, I would say, is the ways in which the U.S. negotiators are using this agreement to try and rewrite U.S. law. I mean, I find it morally repugnant and outrageous that the U.S. negotiators be pushing Big Pharma's agenda to raise medicine prices for the developing countries in the TPP. People in Vietnam, in all the developing countries that have HIV, AIDS, that have malaria, they need access to generic medicines, and this would cut it off. But they're actually doing it also to us. So to the extent theoretically they're sort of supposed to be representing our interests, it would make cancer drugs in this country more expensive. Evergreening of patents, changing just a little tweaky thing, the 6-hour versus 12-hour version of a medicine, you get 20 more years of monopoly. Also undermining our internet freedom by rewriting U.S. law. There's language in there where U.S. law says there's an exception for liability for U.S. internet service providers. The U.S. is the only country in that bracket that's saying, no, we shouldn't allow that in TPP. It's backdoor diplomatic legislating. And that ties into that business with fast track. Why were, and it's now 27 Republican members, because there was a second letter that came out of Republicans, and 151 Democrats, why were they all saying together in the last 36 hours, no fast-track trade process? We don't want to give away our constitutionally granted authority over trade policy. And a big piece of the reason is the left and the right in Congress may disagree on what the policy should be, but they actually believe that constitutionally Congress gets to write our legislation. So the notion of this backdoor legislating that we saw actually revealed in this WikiLeaks is precisely what is uniting, animating congressional outrage at the notion that after being left out of these negotiations uninformed, somehow they should volunteer to handcuff themselves so they can be thoroughly steamrollered and have even their legislating authority undermined through this so-called trade agreement. That's really a backdoor coup d'etat. And the bottom line with TPP, as this WikiLeaks just showed, it's very dangerous. It's not about trade. You got to find out about it. And you got to make sure your member of Congress maintains their constitutional authority. Democracy is messy. But I myself more trust the American public, the press, and this Congress rather than 600 corporate advisors. We need to make sure what's in that trade agreement suits us. And you all are going to be the difference in doing that.